Hey everyone, how's it going today, and welcome to another episode. So in today's episode, as the title suggests, I want to make this as a little bit of a guide where I talk about some ways and tips about how to actually survive unemployment, but specifically financially. Because obviously I will say is that and a huge disclaimer is that this is something that even I struggle with to this day, because this is just logic. If you think about it, if you happen to be unemployed, then it means that obviously there is no money coming in, at least certainly for the traditional person that was working a job with one source of income. There is obviously no money coming in, and if there's no money coming in, then how are we going to survive financially? But there are certain tips and tricks that I personally used during the time when I was unemployed for over 1 year to help me try to financially get through, especially if you happen to live in a place that has a relatively high cost of living, such as like me. I lived in New York City, and was a little bit of a background story about me is, if you guys are brand new here, welcome, consider subscribing. But a little bit of a background information about me is that back during the pandemic, when everything was being shut down, I work in an industry, specifically in media, film, and entertainment, where we were considered unessential workers. And because of that reason, basically every single person in my industry went unemployed for over 1 year. So this was obviously a very, very difficult time period. Now, I will say is that unemployment, the programs that we had at that time period, was actually very generous. And there were a lot of people that were actually, some people were even making more money on unemployment at that time period than they were at their regular jobs. But at the very, very end of the day, it is still very inconvenient to be unemployed. It can even be a massive struggle, and that those benefits today are not as they once were. And with so many thousands and thousands of people getting laid off right now across not just my own industry, but across a lot of other industries as well, this is just not a very, very good recipe for setting our futures up for what it really could be financially. So today's video is just going to be pretty much about that. Several tips that I used to survive unemployment as someone that lived it firsthand for the better part of over 1 year, when nobody in my industry, pretty much more or less, was working. So this was not by choice. This was not because we were not good workers. This was because of historical circumstances that we all lost our jobs. So with that being said, let's get this video started. Like, comment, subscribe, and let's get started. So if you're trying to survive unemployment financially, the first thing that you have to do, and I know this one sounds a little bit more common sense, but the reality is that there are so many people I know that just for absolute reasons, we don't know what it is, but that they just are against doing this, which is the fact that if you happen to be unemployed, you have to try to apply for unemployment benefits. This is something that I think should be the absolute first thing that you're doing if you lose your job. I know there's a little bit of a stigma where some people are sometimes hesitant to do this because of the image, but at the end of the day, if you are someone that's in need, then this is what it's there for. It's there to provide some money for relief. Now, obviously today, the unemployment benefits programs are not as generous as they once were during the height of the pandemic, when so many people, like millions and millions and millions of people, were unemployed, truly unemployed at that time period. So the money might not be as good, but at the end of the day, money is still money, and some amount of money is hopefully going to be able to come in handy to bring some money inside to be able to kind of help out at this time. So the first step, without being, just to start off, is to just apply for unemployment benefits. Now, the second step that you really, really want to take in terms of surviving unemployment is that you really, really want to look not just in terms of applying for unemployment, but also applying for a lot of other kinds of government programs as well. So there are so many different programs that provide things such as food, shelter, housing. There are like what low-income housing. There's also obviously SNAP benefits, also known as food stamps. There was a pandemic EBT program, so that's kind of why. But the idea really is that these are just programs that are available that you should definitely consider taking advantage of, that you will probably qualify for. SNAP benefits, food stamps, EBT, reduce low-income housing. I'm trying to think what are some other ones. Reduce transportation if you happen to be in a major city. There were a lot of major cities that offer reduced transportation so that you can kind of get around cheaply if you happen to be someone that's unemployed. But the idea really behind it is that there's just a lot of programs in our country, which is really, really awesome. At least we have this as an option to be able to take advantage of if you happen to lose your job and kind of need that money at this current time period. So that's probably the second thing. Now, the third thing that you can really look into if you happen to lose your job and and go unemployed is you can look at a lot of, so this is a collection of things, but basically you can look at a lot of either nonprofits, charities, or volunteer organizations that you can look into to potentially get some relief. A lot of these places, they sometimes offer things such as like a place you can go to. They offer things such as like free food sometimes, donations. I know it's not ideal, but it is just something to throw out there. Volunteering, that's another very, very good one. As I've mentioned before, is that, if you're someone that's currently out of work, consider maybe volunteering somewhere, because a lot of volunteer centers, while they may not necessarily pay you, they will often provide free food. They will provide a place to go. They'll hopefully be able to give you some level of routine if you've lost that routine because of unemployment. And it's also really interesting because they may also potentially provide you with some level of experience that you can put down on your resume to say that you kind of kept yourself busy and productive when you had lost your job at that time period, or right now at this time period, because again, we're talking in the present moment at this time period. So just some stuff to really, really consider looking into. Now, the next thing that you can really do and we're going to talk about now ways that you can actually potentially bring actual raw amount of money home if you happen to be unemployed. But the fourth thing that you can really look into is to really, really consider starting a side hustle of some kind. So I know a lot of times, and I think that this is probably one of the biggest life lessons that you can maybe take away if you happen to have lost your job, is really about how important it is to have more than one source of income. But if you happen to be unemployed, then you probably, at least maybe to one silver lining, is that you have a lot more free time on your hands compared to someone that is working 70, 80 hours a week. You have been given the gift, as much as it's been a curse, obviously, to be unemployed, you have also been given the gift of having a lot of time, a disposable time, to kind of use for how you want to spend that time period. So this could be, for example, doing things that your heart maybe has always wanted to desire, maybe just finding work in general, but also to consider starting a side hustle, because a lot of times a side hustle can potentially be a great way to bring some extra money in. Obviously, in terms of what specific kind of side hustle, this just depends on your skill set. This is probably something that's going to be another video for another day, so maybe if that's of interest, consider commenting down and subscribing so that if I do ever release that video, you guys can get notified about that. But it is still something to maybe consider. And a kind of extension of this is that you can also look into potentially trying to find some kind of contract, freelance, or part-time work. This one's a little bit more interesting because it's not just about finding a side hustle, but there are also a lot of temp agencies that sometimes are more open to kind of taking a chance and easier to get a position and hire through to make some money home. Because the reason is that because they know a lot of these workers are only just temporary workers, they're more likely to take a chance on you because they know that if things don't work well, they can always just lay you off. Technically, they always can lay you off, but I mean particularly in these situations, because there's actually an end time in sight. And that's the biggest difference. As opposed to like if you're trying to apply for a full-time job, they're more likely to be picky about who they hire, which makes it difficult. The reason is that because they know whoever they hire might potentially have to stay around for something long-term. So that's where they have to be a little bit pickier. But a lot of temp agencies, if you're able to find things such as like contract work, freelance work, especially if you happen to work in the creative industry. Because I know particularly in the creative industry, so anything in the arts, there's just a particular amount of need for people to contract their services. So things such as like photography, the arts, the creative world, anything in that particular world, this is even more particularly true for a lot of those particular jobs. So just some stuff to really consider and look into. And then probably the last thing in terms of surviving unemployment financially is that you're going to have to really look into, and I've made so many videos about this on this channel, but it is important to share, is saving money. This is really important, because the idea really is that when you are at low on money during those time periods, you're gonna have to be living very defensively. You're gonna be having to kind of protect the amount of money that, because obviously there's no money coming in, you also have to be very protective about the amount of money that's exiting your wallet at this current time period. Now, this deserves a video on its own. I've made a lot of videos talking about saving money, so I'll definitely link one video that you can watch after you watch this video at the end screen, talking about several tips that you can use to save money. But the idea really is that you just have to not only be offensive in terms of trying to make money, but you also have to be very defensive about protecting the money that actually leaves your pocket. And those are going to be the key ideas to how you can potentially survive the financial aspect of being unemployed. But with that being said, that's pretty much what I really just wanted to kind of share in today's video. So if you guys hopefully found that relatively insightful, thank you guys so much for watching to the end. As always, remember to smash the like button if you guys hopefully enjoyed that, to share support. Consider leaving a comment, feel free to subscribe, hit the bell, and hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.